Hi everybody, it's Cindy from Ask Nurse Cindy. Been on the ketogenic diet 2 years now, down 75 pounds. My family's down just around 800 pounds. And it's been a dramatic and wonderful journey. It's been a lush journey. And I welcome you to my very first ever Sunday Soapbox. I'm in my studio. Those of you that have been following me for a while know that I have a studio. I really don't. Clearly, I have a very low-key budget. And you'll see cars going behind me in the back. I think I'm funnier than I am. My daughters always tell me that, Mom, you're not as funny as you think you are, but I amuse myself. And I'm going to get on my soapbox for a few minutes today. I'm not going to be on real long. Please feel free to share. This is a very, very important title and a very, very important subject. And I know it is because I'm shaking my glasses at you. Shaking them at you because I'm on a soapbox, okay? Because diabetes is rampant. Please share this. This is so important. Diabetes is tricky. It is causing America healthcare and many global healthcare entities to be very close to bankruptcy because of the high cost. So diabetes is tricky because sugar is sticky. Have you been fed a Mickey? Now, those of you that are young, Google that right now. Don't cut me off to do that, but Google, if you've been slipped a Mickey, and maybe I'll have to change that to slipped a Mickey. If you've been slipped a Mickey, it's sort of like someone putting one of those drugs in your drink. It's something that you unknowingly ingest. You take it in, it becomes part of your body, and it causes you to be taken advantage of. So diabetes is tricky because sugar is sticky. What do I mean by that? I please want you to pay attention that I have on a red shirt. I put on red lipstick for you, and I have a red hat, which I won't wear because and I have my legendary food bag. But whoop, why is everything red? Because I want to talk to you about the diabetes problem we have, the stickiness of sugar, and what it really does, and that leads to inflammation. So let's start at the beginning. Diabetes. Diabetes is where your blood sugar levels are no longer within a normal range. Let's talk about that for just a minute. We all have a normal blood sugar, somewhere between 70 to 90, 95 if you're fasting. After you eat, especially if you eat carbohydrates, when they're digested, will turn into glucose for the most part. Now, fruits or high fructose corn syrup turn into fructose, which is only metabolized in the liver. That is next Sunday's soapbox. I'm going to talk about fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic. But when sugar is absorbed from the small intestines and goes into the bloodstream, the blood and our body, it's a very complex computer program, needs to have a certain level of sugar in it. Too low, you get hangry, you get shaky, you get sweaty, you're like, oh my God, I must eat now. Too much, for a long period of time, I should say, is diabetes. They used to call it sugar diabetes. There's several types. Type 1, we're not going to discuss today. That's juvenile diabetes, or an autoimmune response where the body produces no insulin whatsoever, or very, very minimal. What I want to focus on is type 2 diabetes. And I was listening to a podcast today while I was cleaning out my closet. I have a big bag of clothes to go to Goodwill because they're too big again. Well, I guess the clothes aren't too big. I'm too small. Ha! What a good problem to have. But what happens is that when we eat, our body must have a narrow range of blood sugar level, that's 70 to 90, 95 I was talking to you about, in order for us to be optimized in our health. Too low, you can pass out and go into a coma. Too high, if you don't have any insulin, you can become acidotic. So what happens is we have this really great endocrine gland called the pancreas that produces a hormone called insulin. Insulin has numerous functions, but its main function is to remove the sugar that is in excess out of the bloodstream and store it somewhere. It has an order of precedence. It will offer it to the liver first to be stored as glycogen. It will offer it to the muscles next. It'll offer it to the brain, and brain is probably first. But what happens is the body will store it. Whatever isn't needed by those muscles to be stored as glycogen, the body will store it, and it doesn't store it as glucose. It stores it as fat. because when the glucose comes out of the bloodstream, when insulin comes out of the pancreas and insulin grabs the hand of glucose and escorts it out, it will store it, either liver, muscles, or glycogen, or it will store it in our fat cells. So obesity is basically a really big savings account of calories. So in a famine state, you are great. I am great. I still probably have millions of excess stored calories, even though I've lost the weight I've lost. So what's the problem? What do I mean by diabetes is tricky? Well, diabetes, when the insulin is ineffective at removing the glucose, and why would it become ineffective? Because it's a hormone we make ourselves. Well, the cells over time, when we overexpose our cells, our whole body, to glucose on an ongoing basis, this whole eat 6 small meals a day and snacking. Oh, I was the mistress. I was the queen, the empress of snacking, and I was always craving carbs because my blood sugar would go up after I ate. That's normal. The insulin would come out of my pancreas and bring it back down by pushing it out of the bloodstream. That's normal. We need that to happen. But what we don't need to happen is to eat on an ongoing basis and of carbohydrates and be constantly fueling our body with calories we don't really need unless you're a marathon runner. If you have a desk job, you know, we've just been led astray. So what's the whole? So that's diabetes is tricky. What happens with diabetes is, let's think about insulin resistance. You guys have probably heard this. The cells become resistant to the signal or the knocking on the door of insulin. I was trying to explain it to my husband today on our way to church, and I was saying, you know, honey, it's like your radio, because we got in the car and the radio was like way high. And I'm like, what happens is at first, when we're young, it doesn't take much insulin for our bodies to be able to respond to it and to get the excess blood sugar out of the bloodstream and move it into the cells. But over time, as we constantly bombard it, for instance, someone keeps calling you all the time, and you look at the phone, you're like, no, I'm not going to take that call. And you ignore it, but they keep calling you, and you finally answer it. Over time, our cells become resistant to that knocking on the door of glucose. And I'm going to get to the sticky part. Don't leave me. I'm going to get to the sticky part. And what happens is that the insulin that was enough is no longer enough because the cells have become resistant. They're not answering the door. So the pancreas has to crank up the volume, crank up the production of insulin. And I don't think any of us have ever been in a car that you can continue to crank up the volume until your eardrums burst, maybe at a rock concert. But in other words, the pancreas can only crank up the volume, the production of insulin, to a certain point. And when it gets to that certain crossover point where it's maxed out, it's tapped out, and the cells are still resistant, now your blood sugar cannot be maintained in a normal level. And now you get the official diagnosis of diabetes. So where's the sticky thing come into play? Think of any kid who's eaten cotton candy. Think of any kid who's had a candy bar or maybe a lollipop and they've gotten it on their hands. What sticks to their hands? Everything sticks to their their hair. So sugar is sticky, and this is where it's tricky, because when sugar attaches, and I've done a video. Go back and look at my video done about 1.5 years ago when I have a red Frisbee in my hand and I'm talking about how you can lower your hemoglobin A1C naturally without drugs. And so our white blood, not white blood cells, I'm in red, inflammation is all, we're getting to the sticky part. So the hemoglobin molecule has little receptors. Think of them as little cups that oxygen holds onto. And that's what our red blood cells help us do. They bring in the groceries and they take out the trash. They bring in oxygen and nutrients to our cells. They pick up the waste products. And the oxygen is getting on and off the bus. If you've ever been to a tourist city and you buy one of those all-day bus passes, you can get on and off the bus all you want. On and off, on and off. Oxygen's picked up, oxygen's delivered. However, that little cup, that receptor that the oxygen fits in, that seat on the bus, glucose fits there too. And the glucose is stubborn, and because it's sticky. And once it sticks into that oxygen receptor, hemoglobin A1C, it is not getting off the bus until the bus breaks down totally. In other words, until the red blood cell dies. The average lifespan of a red blood cell is 90 days. That's why your doctor checks your hemoglobin A1C every 3 months, because they can take a snapshot by measuring how many glucose molecules are stuck on the bus, meaning sticky. Diabetes is tricky and sugar is sticky. It sticks, or it glycates. The medical term is glycation. It sticks to your red blood cell, to the hemoglobin molecule, to that oxygen receptor, and they can measure how many glucose molecules are attached, and they give you a percent. So if you are over 6%, your hemoglobin A1C, that means that a lot of the seats on the bus are being taken up by glucose. And those seats, for the most part, now we're always going to have some glycation of our hemoglobin molecule, some stickiness. But we don't want it to be 7, 8, 9, 10, heaven forbid, 14%. It decreases our ability to oxygenate. The seats on the bus are full. There's nowhere for the oxygen to go. And that hemoglobin molecule is now malformed, if you will. And the glycation, the stickiness of this red blood cell is now going to start to cause inflammation. And I couldn't figure out a rhyme for tricky and sticky and Mickey, so everything's red. Okay? Inflammation. What is inflammation? Have you ever had a cut that becomes inflamed? Have you ever been, I was at Aquatica yesterday with the grandbabies, and there were a lot of people that are today, they're inflamed because they were not putting their sunblock on and they were bright red already. So what is inflammation? It's our body's response to some sort of damage or bad state, a state that it doesn't want to be in. We should not go around with inflamed red skin. I specialize in wound care as a nurse. As Nurse Cindy's just my passion. My career is in wound care. And one of the warning signs we look at to see if the wound is doing poorly is the tissue around it inflamed. My husband just walked by. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just talking. Is the tissue around it inflamed? Inflammation, while a necessary part of the wound healing cascade, is absolutely a trigger for all sorts of a host of really basically all of our chronic, modern chronic diseases, whether it's some sort of autoimmune response they're thinking, arthritis, definitely diabetes. There's a huge component of inflammation that causes the problems, that causes diabetics to have problems with retinopathy and go blind, for them to need kidney dialysis because their kidneys start to fail, to have wounds on their feet, and other changes, biomechanical changes to their feet, because as these sticky red blood cells, and I'm taking a very complex process, I'm making it as simple as I can for you. So if any of you are medical doctors or you're PhDs, researchers, just bear with me, because I'm trying to convey that what you eat, what I ate for 59 years by eating so many processed carbohydrates and ignoring the nutrient-dense whole foods that I should have been eating, I was causing a lot of stickiness inside my body, a lot of glycation. The lining of my, the protein lining of my arteries were becoming inflamed. Joints become inflamed. People get irritable bowel syndrome. There's a whole thought process that Alzheimer's has a key relationship to inflammation and lack of being able to process glucose in the brain. And the brain literally starts to become inflamed, and it's a whole cascade. And look up Amy Berger's book called The Alzheimer's Antidote, and there's other great ones out there if you want to read them. But so diabetes is tricky, because our current thought process in normal American medical culture is once you have it, you're resigned. You're like, well, that's just the way it is, and it's progressive, and you maybe have had some relatives, or you know someone that's lost a toe, or on on dialysis or something, or maybe very close friends, or maybe even you yourself. I want to tell you that if we understand that diabetes is an excess, it's a problem with what we're eating if it's type 2. It's a problem of too much consumption of sticky glucose. And if we remove the stickiness, there's this great research article that just came out of Virta Health with Dr. Sarah Hallberg and Dr. Stephen Finney, where they tracked diabetics for a year on a low carbohydrate diet. And what they found was a very nice reduction in their inflammatory markers. Inflammation, red. I don't want the inside of you inflamed. I don't want the inside of me inflamed. My headaches are almost gone. I don't get the migraines anymore. My joint aches and pains are much better. My weight is down. That's a side benefit. That's like almost like the least of my worries at age 61. So if we understand that diabetes is tricky because it causes massive suffering and it causes every organ to have problems with its perfusion, with its delivery of the groceries and the removal of the waste products, because those tiny little capillaries, which are about as thick as a piece of hair of mine, as those red blood cells tumble through it, if they're sticky, they're going to cause microcirculation issues, and distal to that, on the other side of that, there'll be no blood flow. This is why people end up with retinopathy. This is why they end up with kidney failure. There's, of course, there's other things that play into it. But what I'm interested in conveying to you is that, how have we been slipped a Mickey? I can't believe, once I saw Dr. Sarah Hallbird's TED Talk, and I listened to Dr. Eric Westman, and Adam Nally, and Dr. Ken Berry, and I started to understand what's really happening, I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe for all these years I've touted the ADA message of, hey, you need 40. I have a type 1 diabetic daughter. I have a type 1 diabetic daughter, Rachel D., who you should follow, by the way, and a type 2 diabetic mother. And all these years we were saying, well, you have to eat 40 to 60 grams of carbs a meal, and then your snacks should be 15 to 30, and we'll just cover you with insulin. In other words, we'll just give you a medication to help get the blood sugar down in a more normal range. Eat whatever you want. Just eat what you need. You know, here, have a couple 100 grams of carbs a day, because we've got medicine to lower that blood sugar. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when that blood sugar starts to get lowered, it doesn't change. The cells are resistant to it. So people that go on insulin tend to have to go on more and more. I'm on a soapbox. I told you it's a Sunday soapbox. It's my very first one. Wait till you hear about the liver next week. So when we think about what we've been told versus what might be a logical approach if you're type 2 diabetic or you're pre-diabetic, or you've been told you have insulin resistance, if your fasting insulin is greater than 20, then you probably are headed towards diabetes. So, and if you look up Ivor Cummings and the whole Kraft theory and the 4 different levels, you'll understand that many of us are diabetic. We just haven't been diagnosed yet. But if we realize that sticky sugar can be replaced with healthy whole foods, with good proteins, with good healthy fats, and that we can naturally, by reducing the root cause of what's causing the elevated blood sugar, that we can start to reduce our blood sugar naturally. Now, if you're on medication already as a diabetic, I want you to work with your doctor. I don't want you to go on a really low-carb diet without thinking through adjusting your medications. There's the HEAL clinics and Dr. Eric Westman. You can listen to a lot of other, like the Verta Clinic. If you work at Purdue University, they're under contract with them, and you can access them. But you want to work in conjunction, because if you don't reduce that medication in tandem with reducing the carbohydrates, you'll have some severe low blood sugar. So be careful with that. But the Mickey part is that we've thought that we can just still continue to eat whatever we want, and we'll just cover it with some insulin to drop that blood sugar. That sugar has to go somewhere, and if we force it out of the bloodstream, it just goes into the cells. It just continues to increase the obesity. It continues to increase the misery. We continue to have changes to our circulation. We continue to have problems with chronic, debilitating problems with people that are type 2 diabetic. So, diabetes is tricky. Sugar is sticky. It glycates. It sticks to things. It causes inflammation. If we can reduce the inflammation by reducing the stickiness, by reducing our carbohydrate intake, does it not stand to reason that there could be a reduction in medication needs? And I'm focusing today on diabetes, but I'm telling you that there's some amazing things that lowering your carbohydrate consumption also does, such as reducing your blood pressure naturally because you're not holding on to as much water, reducing anxiety. A lot of people talk about a reduction in their IBS symptoms. A lot of people talk about how their arthritis is much resolved. All of those, ladies and gentlemen, are related in one way or the other to inflammation. So that's about it for me. I hope that makes sense. My first ever Sunday soapbox in my studio, which is my car, of course. I hope that makes some sense, that what is diabetes? It's where I have sustained elevation of glucose or sugar in my bloodstream, and that causes sticky changes or glycation end products to every part of my cell that red blood cell goes through, and it goes to every part of my body, causes changes in my brain, a lot of the osteoporosis. There's lots of information and things we can talk about. So it's up to you to practice informed self-care. It's up to you to not believe what I say, but to back it up by looking at people that are MDs, looking out on the web at people that are on the cutting edge of trying to say, hey, clearly, this low-fat, low-calorie, eat less, move more movement from 50 years ago, what's it given us? It's given us unprecedented epidemic of diabetes and obesity. And if we don't turn the tide, if we don't start realizing the power that the food we put in our mouth has on our long-term health, we're a nation that's destined to really be in a lot of trouble. So I'm not telling you what to do. I'm encouraging you to think through this. The Sunday Soapbox today is that diabetes is tricky, sugar is sticky. Have you been fed a Mickey? I hope it helps open your eyes to great information out there. There's tons of stuff out there. There's dietdoctor.com. There's Dr. Eric Westman and his Heal Clinics and Adapt Your Life type of thing. There's tons of stuff out there for you guys to access. I hope you do. I hope you practice informed self-care. I am not looking at any of the comments because I've already gone on too long. It's a soapbox, and when someone's on the soapbox, they deliver their message, and then hopefully they get down. But I will go back through. I'll look at your comments, and I just hope you know that sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, I hope that you start to understand the value of informed self-care, that when you understand that the food you eat, and you're the only one that gets to decide what goes in your mouth, unless they tie you down and hold your nose, and that makes you open your mouth, and then they stuff the food down. We have control. I flew back from the UK I'd lost my wallet in Heathrow. I really didn't have any food. The food they had on the plane, I had some 5 Duke sausages, I had a couple, some nuts and stuff. And I could have said, well, I'm stuck on a plane for 8.5 hours. I'm going to eat what they have. I'm not doing that to myself. Why? Was I hungry? Yes. I will not go start down that path of inflammation again. I'm not going to do it. I know too much. I just can't do that to myself. So self-care, self-love, you guys are worth it. Share this if you want. I would really love to help others understand and start to explore that we might have been fed a Mickey. And I don't think it was I'm not really into the conspiracy theory. I think people were well-intentioned. But there's so much to understand that when I drop the sugar I put in my mouth, that the sugar in my bloodstream is going to accordingly go down. And then that means that I might need fewer medications. I might not need to go on medication. I might feel better, both physically and mentally, and feel better about myself and my future. So I want you to be filled with hope today. I don't care how long it takes. I do for you, because I don't want you to be discouraged. This did not happen to you and I overnight. This takes time. Be patient, be kind to yourself, make the best choice you can today. If you fall off the wagon, that's okay. Don't let the wagon roll over you, okay? Get up, hop back on. Life is worth living fully and with much love. From me to you on my first ever Sunday Soapbox. Take care. Bye.